Mother Teresa was a woman filled with wisdom, and one time she was asked what, in her opinion, was the first thing that needed to change in the church. And she said, "You and me." Two things were very clear from what she said. On the first hand, the church is all of us, the baptized. It's not just someone else. It's not just the hierarchy, the bishops and the pope. It's all of us. And on the other hand, yes, there is grounds for change. There is need for change. Every Christian and the whole community of the faithful are called to constant renewal, again and again. And this is difficult today because we are living through what seems to be a serious crisis in the church. Large numbers of Catholics lack knowledge of the most basic elements and notions of the faith. And the great certainties of the faith are being undermined by many people, for many people, by a vague religiosity that lacks commitment. And many of the baptized live as if Christ did not exist, and still more have abandoned him and his church. And as if this were not enough, many Catholics make scandalous or confusing statements, whether they are laymen or women, priests, bishops, cardinals, or even the Pope himself. And I want to make a little aside about some of the events this week. There was a big dust-up over some comments the Pope made, giving his personal opinion on a matter. So how are we to understand these things? Well, I think it's like this. If you go to school one day and the teacher in the morning says to you, 2 + 2 = 4. And then she shows you, here's 2 apples, here's 2 apples. You put them together, 1, 2, 3, 4 apples. 2 + 2 = 4. And then you go to recess and lunch and you come back to class and there's a different teacher. And the other teacher kind of casually says, well, 2 + 2 = 5. And then at this point you ask, well, what do you mean by that? And if this is what you're teaching, can you explain it? Can you show us? Because what we had heard previously made more sense. Or did you make a mistake? Do you want to take that back? And I think this is where we're at with this situation and with many different things within the church. We should go back and fall back on what has been taught very clearly and with great authority and shown to be true. So in this and many areas, that should be our approach to these types of things. But we are in a crisis, so what are we to do? How do we start to renew the church? Well, we have to go back to what Mother Teresa said. It is we, you and I, who are the ones who need to be renewed and deepened in our Christian lives. And this can be frustrating because you might say, well, Father, I'm not the problem. And maybe not, but you are part of the solution. And this is exactly what Jesus taught too. He went around and called individuals to conversion and baptism and then to a life of grace and discipleship. And he set very high standards for them. Once they reached one level, he set another standard, and he said that we are all called to perfection. And I am sure that I am not perfect, and I believe that none of us here is. So we have lots of room to grow. But what we need to do is to strive to see where we are, and then from there, change and grow. Last year, we talked a lot about our discipleship pathway and finding our place there and seeing how we might progress. You know, for some of us, making it to Mass every Sunday is a challenge, and that's a place to start. Others, daily prayer might be a challenge, or praying the rosary, that might be a challenge. Wherever we are, there's still more for us to grow in. And this has been the solution to every crisis that the church has ever faced, that God has raised up saints, men and women, popes, bishops, priests, laity, and all types. So that's what's going to happen today, too. I'm confident of that. And in today's gospel, Jesus summarizes the Christian life with this twofold commandment of love, loving God with our whole heart, soul, and mind, and loving our neighbor. This simple formulation hides a great depth of challenge for each of us, and it invites us to truly reckon with our tendency to place something or someone else before God, to make idols, or to compromise, to say, I will love God with 50% of my heart, or a quarter of it, or whatever. But we need to grow with that. And the second commandment invites us to rightly love ourselves and to truly love others as they deserve. Because we can't love others unless we love ourselves first. And I would like to share a story that I read this week that I found very touching. I shared it on Friday, so some of the students have heard it, but it's about John Paul II, who is a canonized saint. He's Saint John Paul II. He was a pope for, I think, 27 years. And in 1981, he had only been a pope for a few years. He came to Alaska, and as they were driving along in their motorcade, he spotted a young girl holding a bouquet of flowers. And so they stopped, and he went over to the girl, and he asked her what her name was. And she said, "My name is Molly Marie." And she handed him the flowers. And the flowers were the state flower of Alaska. They're called forget-me-nots, and they're sky blue. And so the Polish Pope, asked her, "What kind of flowers are these?" And she said, "Forget-me-nots." And the Pope looked at her and said, "I won't." And he took the flowers and he departed. Well, 3 years later, he happened to be close to Alaska, flying around, visiting places. So he went back to Alaska and received a great reception. And there in the crowd at the airport, he saw Molly's mother without Molly. And he went up to her and said, "Where's Molly?" And she said, "Molly died of leukemia." And he was visibly shaken by this. And so when he gave his remarks that day, he told everyone gathered there, including the President of the United States, the story about Molly, and saying that she had been called home to the Father, and that her deed would not be forgotten, and that her memory would be held as a blessing. 1 billion Catholics worldwide, and the Pope remembered Molly. That's the type of love that we are to have as Christians. We are to love everyone as they deserve. Imagine having that type of love for everyone. It is a result of a deep prayer life and a commitment to the life of grace. When we love God with our whole heart, we have more capacity to love others. And when we love others in this way, it is a way for us to truly love God, because everyone is made in his image. So no matter where we find ourselves, we need to commit to growth in knowledge and in love in order that we might become saints and renew the church from within. And in this way, we choose to live as persons of hope, since we have every reason for it. Today in our second reading, St. Paul encouraged the Thessalonians because they had, in his words, turned to God from idols, to serve the living and true God, and to await his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, Jesus, who delivers us from the coming wrath. Jesus is our hope, so let us hold fast to him and be transformed.